Your county attorney, I know Sue has told me there are certain things that she has redacted in these, if anything that dealt with the birth date, social security numbers, health information of any of the employees of the county. And that is certainly fine. That's what we're trying to accomplish, to make sure that we are protecting documents that should be confidential, but also obtaining the records that we need to complete our investigation, and with the understanding that the vast majority of anything we ask for are in the public domain anyway. These are public government records that should be accessible to the general public, but also to the state Senate to conduct our work here. So thank you, and just let me know before we post anything on the website, any documents, if there are any that you feel like need to be shielded or protected in any way. Fair enough? All righty. Before we get started, I will need to swear each of you in. Mr. Pitts, I'll start with you. If you will raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear the testimony that you will give before this committee this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and to the best of your knowledge and ability?
I do.
All right. And Ms. Whitmore, would you likewise? You swear the testimony you'll provide this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Right. We have our court reporter present. We'll be making a transcript of all the testimony, and we're happy to share that with you. It will become part of the public record afterwards. If you later want to correct any answers or add information, we welcome that. And I will state before we begin, as we say every meeting, that our Senate website is set up that if anybody from the public has information you think might be relevant to our investigation, feel free to reach out to us and provide any information that could be relevant to us, and let us know if you would like to testify before this committee as our process unfolds throughout the summer and the fall. Mr. Pitts, let me get you just to give us a little brief background. You and I know each other, yes, and I think most people in Fulton County know of you from your long history of public service. If you would tell us a little bit about the position you hold and how long you've been in the chairman's post and any other political service before that, I think it might give some context.
Thank you, Senator, Mr. Chairman. I've been, as you've indicated, been involved as an elected official for many years. And I look at Senator Butler, and I kind of count sometimes to figure out just who's still standing. And I'm sorry that you're going to be leaving us. But I began my political career in Atlanta as a member of the Atlanta City Council. I served there for 20 years as a member of the Atlanta City Council. Then I was elected as president of the city council. I served 4 years as president. Then I moved over to the county, where I served for, I think, 12 years as a member of the commission, as a commissioner. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I have been privileged to serve as chair of the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County.
All right. And as in that position, how often does your commission meet? Is it twice a month?
We meet the first and third Wednesdays of every month.
Okay. Is it part of the duties and responsibilities of the Fulton County Commission to establish the budget for the district attorney's office and some supervision of that office?
We establish the budget for the district attorney as well as all other departments for final approval.
And when you're formulating the budgets, does the district attorney submit to you a budget request for public funding?
The process, and I'll defer to our chief financial officer, but there's a process where the department heads appear before the manager and the finance team to explain their requests, and then from there it comes to us for final approval. You might want to clarify.
So the budgets of all the county departments, including the district attorney's office, are ultimately approved by the county commission?
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Whitmore, if it's okay with you, I may bounce back and forth between witnesses because I understand, as the chairman just deferred to you, there are areas where you have particular expertise. Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Brenda, I'm not going to make your life as miserable as you're sitting there thinking right now. Our court reporter is going to try to keep a transcript, but you will occasionally have to go back and forth between witnesses. I will have, I'm going to have Ms. Whitmore later, a direct line of questioning her, but I may periodically let her chime in here, okay? All right. Sharon, tell us a little bit about that, how that budgeting process works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Pitt's description is the general process. Actually, every department of county government, including constitutional officers and elected officials, submit an annual budget request through our budget development application. Those requests are reviewed, vetted, and verified through our budget office. The county's budget ordinance is designed in a way that the budget is developed and presented to the Board of Commissioners as a recommendation from the Office of the County Manager. So we have a review process that we undertake with the county manager and members of his executive team to review the requests that are presented. Typically, we provide each agency with a base budget figure to start with, and then they are allowed to submit what we call budget enhancements, where they can ask for additional resources to just continue an existing program, to expand an existing program, or to establish a new program or service. We also have a separate process that we run simultaneously as the operating budget for a capital budget requests, and there is a capital budget review committee that receives and vets all of those requests, and they are then in turn taken into consideration at the same time as operating budget requests, because we only have one pool of resources to use. So we consider all of those at the same time. So our constitutional officers and elected officials submit their requests through the same channels. Sometimes they may choose not to come and present to the county manager's office and then choose instead to communicate their budget needs directly with the Board of Commissioners. So that, in a nutshell, is the county budget process.
And when you talk about capital expenditures, is that like new automobiles for police departments, new buildings, new expenditures on things along those other than personnel?
Yes, sir. Rolling stock, heavy equipment, facility renovation, new facilities, facility expansion, all of that would come through our capital portal process.
So when we talk about building a new county jail, that's a capital project?
That is one very significant capital project, yes, sir.
Can you give us just a feel for what the size of Fulton County's annual budget is?
All funds included, it's about $1.2 billion.
And do you have readily available what amount of general funds from the county are allocated to the district attorney's office on an annual basis? I guess we'll just talk about this year to start with.
In 2024, the district attorney's allocation was $36.6 million from the general fund.
Okay. Chairman Pitts has tried to explain to me that there are several buckets of funds that are used to fund the district attorney's office. Would you kind of run that through for me as to what additional funding over and above the $36.6 million of general funds from county tax revenues that are allocated to the district attorney?
Yes, sir. The district attorney, in addition to the county's general fund resources, also has resources that are available through the confiscated asset forfeiture fund, as well as the Victims Witness Assistance Fund, federal asset forfeiture funds, and we keep all of these in separate funds, and then a number of different grants that come through the state and federal grant process. And then since really the middle of 2021, when we developed our spending program for the resources that we received through the American Rescue Act, the district attorney has also had resources available for what we call our Project Orca, which is our court backlog project that was funded out of our ARPA resources.
Okay, let me slow down on that one just a minute. Did you say Project Orca, like an orca whale?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that acronym, does that stand for something you could help tell us?
It's more, I guess, visual than that. It just was intended to mean that it was a very, an orca is a very large ocean mammal, and the court backlog that we had as a result of the slowdown in the court system during the pandemic was also very large. So the individual who was charged with developing a program to address the court backlog named it Project Orca, but it is our official court backlog reduction program.
And this is funded through federal funds?
Through our ARPA resources, yes, sir.
Right. And the ARPA money was put in to sort of help all the states recover from the COVID epidemic?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know the amount of ARPA funds that were allocated to the district attorney's office or the Orca project?
I don't have that number available with me today, but I can share it.
And as far as the expenditures of that fund, is that anything that the county commission had authority or discretion over where the money went, how it was spent?
Specifically, is your question specific to the ARPA resources themselves?
Yes.
Yes, sir. They determined where and how our ARPA resources would be utilized. The county executive team made a recommendation, and the Board of Commissioners adopted that recommendation, and we have modified it over the course of time as we have continued to execute on our spend for the ARPA resources.
And one of the areas you allocated some of the ARPA funding was to this Orca project.
Yes, sir. In total, about $75 million is what we allocated to Project Orca.
And who else was allocated funds through the Orca project in addition to the district attorney's office?
Most of the partners from our justice system received funding out of the Project Orca resources. The district attorney's office, the state court, superior court, magistrate court, public defender, the sheriff's department, I believe juvenile court received some. So we took a look across the entire justice system to see where we would need to plug in some additional resources in order to develop a work plan to, bring our backlog that had accumulated, to bring those numbers down.
So if $75 million was applied to the Orca project, do you know what amount of the $75 million went to the district attorney's office?
I don't have the exact dollar amount with me. I can tell you that she did receive funding to cover 75 positions, which was the highest number of positions that were provided across the justice agencies. But I'm sorry, I didn't bring that. I don't have that number with me, and I don't know it off the top of my head.
I'm not certain if we even requested that. I know that you are continuing to compile for me the essentially the ledger or roster of employees employed by the district attorney's office, and I suppose we'll be able to break this out as you compile that data, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have any idea how many employees in the district attorney's office now?
I believe she has about 277 employees, plus the positions in Orca, so a little over 300, maybe 340.
And that would include assistant district attorneys and investigators and secretarial help, the entire spectrum of staff.
Yes, sir.
Will the Orca funds expire anytime soon or be exhausted? I know if it came through ARPA, that's sort of winding down at this point, right?
Yes, sir. We are undertaking an effort currently to ramp down our Orca spend within the $75 million that was allotted and within the general time frame that was provided for the spending to occur, which is 12/31/2024.
So we're at the tail end, the last year of that, huh?
Yes, sir.
The way you described the budget process sounds very similar to the state budget process, where it's almost a continuation budget from the year before, and then there are requests for additions, increases if you need more staff or if circumstances have changed or need to make a capital expenditure.
Yes, sir. I mean, we tend to start from the previous year and build onto that. If a department received funding in a previous year that was not intended to be part of their recurring budget, then we make adjustments for that. That's why I said we provide them with a base budget, so that base budget each year will reflect the ins and the outs from, whatever transpired in the previous year's budget cycle. So if a department received funding for a particular project or purpose that's not intended to happen on an annual basis, then we pull those monies back out and readjust and realign their base budget.
Okay. How much detail does the district attorney's office provide when they make their annual budget request? Is it fairly itemized by employee, by expenditure type, where it goes?
In our process, we provide them with a line item version of their budget in our budget development application. We provide them with a position summary. So we give them a report of all of their positions, and it's as of a point in time, and they are required to make any corrections to that position summary report, because that becomes the basis for their salary and fringe benefit budget for the base year. And then they are allowed to go in and align the operating portion of their budget in whatever manner suits their operational needs. We do have a couple of object codes that we really do not allow them to deviate much from, because they are necessary to fund things like our risk management fund. So, we have an object code specifically for that. That's a rate times the number of positions that you have. So there's no deviation there. But they do have the ability to go in and adjust their budget. They are requested to provide details, contract names and amounts for specific contracts. So like our Department of Real Estate and Asset Management would come in and identify their contractors that they have and their contracts that they have for things like janitorial services. If they have professional service contractors, they would identify them. It is an ask. Some departments do a better job of others than, providing a lot of detail and support for their asks. So, we spend a lot of time and a lot of back and forth trying to understand, especially when they have submitted for an enhancement request or a new program, trying to make sure that they've put everything in that they should be including in those requests. But they do have the opportunity to align it how they would like to see it and provide detailed explanations for their requests.
Okay. And Chairman Pitts, back to you just for a minute. That's why I was letting her get into the minutia there, because I know that's why you hired her, right?
That's correct.
Okay. The way you've explained it to me is that with certain elected officials that are provided for under the Georgia Constitution, like the district attorney's office and the sheriff's department, these are elected officials and our state constitution provides the sort of parameters of their authority and responsibilities, right?
That's correct.
For those, particularly those two, a sheriff and a district attorney, do you micromanage their budget, or is it fairly well left within their authority under the state constitution?
Well, there are what we call constitutional officers, and we have 3 or 4 of those. And then the district attorney is in a sort of a different category. But also, now I'll have to defer to get the correct terminology from our county attorney. But constitutional officers believe that once their budget has been approved by the Board of Commissioners, then they are free to manage that budget any way they see fit. And that's because of this law, I suppose, that gives them that authority.
So you can't micromanage their spending once you've granted them the budget, appropriated the money to them from the general funds?
Probably not. And that's, I guess the answer to that would be no, we cannot.
But essentially, you don't have to appropriate money to them unless they can justify for you why they need it and what they intend to spend it for. The
Well,
line item listing that Ms. Whitmore just referenced.
right. When the departmental budget comes to us, and say, even with the constitutional officers, there are line items. But we fund the line items, and that results in a total. But once we've approved it, they can disregard the line items that we have approved, and therein lies, I guess, a source of conflict from time to time.
Do you have a good grasp on exactly how much money runs through the DA's office budget every year? You know, 36.6 million comes from your general funds from the taxpayers of Fulton County. And then they have money that they get from these forfeitures and from a portion of fine money. And then they may have grants, et cetera, both state and federal on top of that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then the state itself funds a certain number of positions, including the district attorney's salary and a certain number of assistant district attorneys based on the number of judges in the circuit.
That's my understanding, yes, sir. But we do not monitor that. And what we are aware of is that the 36 plus million that comes from the general fund, and rarely do we keep up with how much they've received from grants or fines and forfeitures and things of that nature.
Right. That's something that's within the control of the district attorney's office.
Correct.
Okay. Do they ever report that amount to you? I mean, it would seem in the course of making a budget request to you, they need to show a need for money, and that would necessarily require them to show you what they're getting from other sources to figure out what they need from you.
As a matter of course, that is not provided to us. Now, whether that comes, that is made available during the budget process with staff, I'm not sure.
We will look at other sources that they have available when they're asking for an enhancement to see if there is another source that could be used instead of the general funds. And I guess I would just like to perhaps add a little clarification to what the chairman just said about the other sources of funds. Those are maintained on the county's financial system. So we do have the federal asset forfeitures, the confiscated assets. There are buckets of those. They are presented to the board in the special appropriation grant funds. The board, there is no reporting that comes forward to the board on those, and because the board isn't authorizing those resources. They come from other sources. There isn't a lot that comes back to the board on those. From a grant perspective, like a federal grant perspective, we do present the grant applications that are made on our grant activity report to the board. And again, the grant activities and reporting are captured on the county's financial system and are included in our required single audit report each year. So that's the reporting. But there is no other reporting that is completed on those funds by the district attorney to the Board of Commissioners.
But from your accounting standpoint, you're the chief financial officer. When these funds from whatever source get deposited in a bank account, somebody's got to make an entry. The deposit was made and where it came from.
Yes, sir. So if resources are received, then they are presented over to the county treasury. They're deposited, and within these funds, then the spending credit, if you will, is provided to the agency that's receiving the funds. We have, multiple agencies that receive federal asset forfeiture funds and confiscated asset funds. So we track it by each department within those funds, and when the resources are received, they are given credit for them. On the grants, many of the grants are, of course, drawdown grants. So we're spending the county's resources first and seeking reimbursement from the granting agency. So whatever the required drawdown process is, our grants administration office in the finance department would be involved in assisting and facilitating the the financial reporting requirements. Programmatic reporting requirements are typically managed directly by the department or agency that has received the grant. But our grant administration unit will ensure that the whatever periodic required financial reporting is complete, and that the drawdowns are completed on a timely basis so that the county is not fronting that money for too long of a period of time.
And tell me what you just referenced, a single audit. What did you mean by that?
That's the audit that any entity that receives a federal grant is required to have completed on an annual basis. Our external auditors complete the single audit. It is a specific audit of all federal and state grant funds.
And is that broken out between your various county agencies and departments, including the district attorney's office?
Yes, the auditors have a requirement to identify major programs and audit on a risk basis, and so they determine which programs may get a more thorough and very specific audit process. But all of the grants are included, and all of the information that they ask for is provided to them as part of that single audit process.
Is that a written document report that you would receive every year?
The single audit?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And is that a requirement of each agency, including the district attorney's office, to provide the requested data and information to the auditor?
It is, yes.
By reviewing that, are you able to pretty well track all of the spending of grant funds anyway by the district attorney's office?
At a summary level.
Right.
It's not detailed. It just basically gives you, the total amounts.
Of what was received and
Expended,
what was spent?
yes, sir.
Does it give a category of the spending?
I believe that it's just listed by the individual grants.
Okay. Would that explain or reveal to you what personnel was paid for by specific grants?
It is not. The report itself is not at that level of detail.
All right.
No.
Is that provided to you in any way? In your role as CFO, do you get to see, you know, which employees are funded by county money versus a federal grant versus a state grant versus a combination?
Yes, that information would be available to me. Again, when those grants are awarded and received, we establish the budget. If personnel expenses are included in the grant award, then the budget office will work with the recipient agency to ensure that the appropriate positions are created and established within the grant to ensure that they comply with whatever the application and the budget document that was presented to the granting agency includes.
And we've had conversations before this morning as you've tried to explain to me some of these different funding sources. It seems to me like on a lot of the staff attorney or assistant DA positions and other investigators and other folks that are working for the DA's office, that their salary is paid partly by the state with a local supplement, a county supplement. Explain that to our committee so we can figure this portion out.
Yeah, there are a handful of positions, assistant district attorneys, deputy district attorneys, investigator, maybe some legal assistants who are paid by the state and supplemented by the county. So we call them state supplemented positions. And I'm not 100% on what the total number is right now. I think it's somewhere between 15 and 20. I'm not sure which of those are filled. So that's part of the information that we have yet to finalize to be able to provide to you.
Still trying to break that out exactly.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So what about an employee of the DA's office's health insurance benefits? Is that paid by the state of Georgia, the state health benefit plan, or by Fulton County's health plan?
Positions that are 100% county funded positions are paid by the county. I will have to have one of the supplemental positions pulled. At one point in time, under a previous district attorney, some of them were receiving county benefits. I'm not certain at this point with DA Willis if they are also receiving county benefits or not. So I will actually need to go and pull that information.
And what about retirement funds? I know state employees are eligible for state retirement benefits. Do you have county retirement benefits for these county employees?
Fulton County has a closed defined benefit plan that closed in 1999. If there are employees in the district attorney's office who were employed by the county and participated in that plan and chose to stay in it, then they would be eligible for a defined benefit pension upon their retirement from the county. We also have, since that point in time, had a defined contribution plan in place that is available to full-time county employees. We have amended it over time to include or exclude certain groups. As we've learned, certain groups have been added into and out of other plans. So full-time employees have the benefit of that defined contribution plan.
And that would be at the cost to Fulton County taxpayers rather than state taxpayers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there may be 2 or 3 of us working as assistant DAs under Ms. Willis, and if I'm one of the state-funded positions, I would be receiving a different type of health insurance plan possibly and a different type of retirement plan than my colleague that's a supplemental employee that's funded by the county alone.
Possibly, yes, sir.
Okay.
I will confirm that in our response.
What about folks that are independent contractors of the DA's office, like a special counsel, special assistant DA, how are they paid?
They are treated as professional services and paid as if they were a county vendor.
And do you consider them then a county employee or a county vendor or an independent contractor?
A independent contractor with a receipt of a vendor payment.
And as far as benefits from those type of independent contractors, would they receive any health insurance benefits or retirement benefits at all?
No, sir.
Okay. And do you, in the county level, have any control over what they're paid?
No, sir. That's at the discretion of the district attorney.
Okay. Does the district attorney, and I'm going to shift back to you, Chairman Pitts, have to advise you of what's going on with these independent contractors that are being hired?
No, sir.
Okay. Do they have to request funding from you? And is that in the budget request that I need X amount for a specific prosecutor or as a category of assistance that I need to get from an independent contractor?
Well, let me try to answer that question this way. First of all, we have what's called outside counsel, and I'm going to make a distinction between outside counsel and a special prosecutor.
All right, explain that one to us.
Right. An outside counsel is hired when the county attorney determines that there's a need for assistance. She then, in this case, she will make a recommendation to the board and explain why she needs outside counsel. She makes that recommendation to us, and if we agree, and that's typically done in the executive session, and if we agree, then we will take a public vote and authorize the hiring on the recommendation of the county attorney of outside counsel. And we have a range, an hourly rate. I'm not sure what that hourly rate is, nor whether that's really relevant, but there's a range that we pay outside counsel. And that's different from a special prosecutor.
Would outside counsel have anything to do with criminal prosecutions, or are they representing the county's interest in other type of matters?
Do
you know?
Joe? Yeah, I got the right answer. I was going to, I thought I was right, but I wanted to make sure. We don't hire outside counsel for criminal matters.
All right, that would be for dealing with other county legal matters that you needed extra help from somebody other than the county attorney's office.
It'd be more civil. Primarily civil versus criminal.
So who's the brains back there behind you you're consulting with?
It's a county attorney.
And what's her name?
Sue Joe.
Sue Joe.
Yes.
And that's S-O-O and then J-O?
Yes,
I got
sir.
that right?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Ms. Joe, I may ask you to share some information with us. You're not under subpoena and it won't be sworn testimony, but if it comes a time where you can help sort of enlighten us, you just let us know, or else you can keep letting the chairman know. All right, so those outside counsel have to be approved by the county commission.
Correct.
And it's done on the recommendation of the county attorney.
Correct.
Or the request, and that would specify the pay rate that those folks would be paid.
That's correct.
All right, and the second category?
Second category would be a special prosecutor. And the special prosecutor is, I believe I'm correct on this, that the district attorney has sole discretion under very narrow circumstances, and I don't know how to define narrow circumstances, but that's how it's been described to me, to hire, independent of the board of commissioners, a special prosecutors.
Okay.
That's her decision and her choice.
But that
We
would,
have nothing to do with that.
you wouldn't have anything to do with the selection or approval of that counsel.
That's correct.
But you would ultimately be paying for that counsel through the general appropriations bucket in the budget that you approve for the DA's office.
For special prosecutor?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm told yes.
All right. And you're told that by your chief financial officer?
Yes.
That's her job to know?
Yes.
Okay. On those people.
We wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know the name of them
No.
or how much they're being paid?
No.
But you're going to see a line item on an audit at the end of the year showing how much that person was paid?
Is that correct?
They're typically captured as professional services expenses.
And is that in a group or individual?
It's professional services object code within the district attorney's budget within the general fund.
All right, that's, didn't educate me. I'm wanting to, does that mean if Ms. Willis hires 15 special prosecuting attorneys and pays them $10 million, that's all you see is that $10 million was spent for that type of personnel? Or does it give you how much Mr. Wade got, how much Mr. Johnson and Mr.
So our system captures all of that, but as far as how our reports roll up, at the object code level, you would just see the total amount. You would have to actually go into the accounting system to extract the details of the payments for professional services, because there may be more than just legal services or outside or special prosecutor services within the object code for professional services.
You got professional services, it doesn't even delineate how much is attorneys and how much is a janitor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if I want to find out how much Mr. Wade was paid for his services as a special prosecutor, who has that data? I want to issue a subpoena to find that out. Do I give it to you as the county and you can discern that? Or do I have to go to whoever hired this professional service provider?
The county actually has an open government platform. You could go to our open checkbook and you could search by the name, and it would pull up the name of any vendor that matches that description, and you could find, payments that way. So you could go in and type in Mr. Wade's name or the name of his law firm, and you would be able to pull those documents. You could also submit an open records request to the finance department, and the accounts payable team would pull the details and provide that documentation, or you could subpoena probably the district attorney or any member of her staff that is involved in their internal accounting and vendor payment process.
It
was
only-
included in my subpoena.
Right, so
So
that's my question.
Yes.
Can you find that information?
Yes.
Or do I have to go to the DA who may not provide?
No,
it?
we have that information.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you can tell me the recipient by name of these professional services payments.
What we provided today was specific to Mr. Wade. We are working on, the request also included any other attorney, so we are still working on that. Our process is we are searching now through all of the transactions within that professional services object code, pulling out the ones that appear to be legal firms and pulling the underlying supporting documentation to determine if they were in fact legal firms and if those expenses are responsive to the subpoena, and if so, they will be provided.
And I know I might sound a little lawyerish here. I don't mean to be hounding you, but I'm wanting to make sure that I address that subpoena to the right person. And I'm told you are the bomb. You are the answer to financial questions in Fulton County, or can get them. If I'm wrong, help direct me where I need to submit additional subpoenas to track down that information.
No, sir. Submitting a subpoena to me is, should be sufficient.
And I will say on the record, you have been very responsive, and I know it's a lot of data and information, and I appreciate your efforts to continue providing that to me.
Thank you.
You have been completely transparent and helpful in trying to find things. So you said supporting documentation. What kind of supporting documentation would there be for a professional services payment to a law firm?
Typically, their billing statement.
Do you have supporting documentation to show you a contract with them, with the independent contractor between the legal services provider and the district attorney's office or the county?
The contracts typically are not provided as part of the supporting documentation. It can be requested, but
From you or from the DA's office?
if I have it, I will provide it. If I don't have it, and it's something that I can't get, then I wouldn't be able to provide it.
Okay. Because this is sounding to me kind of like the Wild West. Very little control from Fulton County over a $36 million budget. You don't know how much of that is spent on professional services, who is hired, how much they're paid per hour, what their total compensation is, yet you're being asked to provide $36.6 million a year that you know encompasses a number of those type of independent contractors that you're funding with no oversight or control, right?
Yeah, the Board of Commissioners has no oversight over the district attorney.
So your only control is the power of the purse, whether you continue funding money that can be used for those purposes, or whether you restrict that funding. Is that fair, Chairman Pitts? I guess that's really your question.
Could you repeat that, Mr. Chairman?
So your only control is the power of the purse, is either granting or rejecting requests for additional funding from the DA's office.
That's correct.
Okay. And that has to be based upon assurances presented to you by the DA as to why she would need particular amounts of funding?
Right. The DA can come before the board and make a request at any time, and we would consider the request, and if we agree, then we'll grant it.
Right.
If we disagree, then we won't grant it.
And in that request, do you require her to give some specifics? Some who I want to hire, why I need to hire somebody, how much I want to pay them, what's going to be the cap on their
We don't
services?
get into that sort of detail. I mean, she'll would make a case as to why the need is there and what it would cost. But as far as individual names and what the compensation for a given individual would be, we don't get that kind of detail, nor do we ask it.
Did DA Willis ever make a request for specific funding for a special assistant DA, prosecuting DA, for for Mr. Wade?
Not to my knowledge.
And is her position that she doesn't have to ask or provide that information to the county in order to make a supplemental funding request?
Well, again, with respect to the special prosecutor, that's solely the purview of the district attorney, unlike the outside counsel.
All right. But you fund the district attorney based upon her stated needs or her requests for funding, right?
Correct.
Okay. In her budget request, does she have a category for special prosecutors?
I don't recall seeing a special category.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would have to say that she, as have prior district attorneys, have asked for resources, trial expense resources,
Right.
without it being specific to X amount for a special prosecutor or X amount for expert witnesses or, things like that. I think that it's been more like we know we have these major prosecutorial matters that will be moving forward and will require, additional resources. But I don't recall there being any specific line item details necessarily associated with that.
All right, so we heard testimony at a previous meeting that there was a team of at least 10 assistant DAs working on an election interference case, and at least 3 special counsel that are being paid as independent contractors, including Mr. Wade. Was that ever described to the county commission in any of the funding requests?
I don't recall that coming before the board.
So she never came to you and said, I'm going to need a lot of money here to conduct this prosecution of, now there's 16 different defendants I'm going to call it the election interference case. Was that ever expressed to the county commission that that's part of why you were asked to give $36.6 million?
Again, not with that level of detail. So again, trial expenses.
Just generically, not even for the type of prosecution?
I want to say for the 23 budget, and I will have to go back and verify this, that there was some communication where she identified a need for resources because she expected to have to retry a case that had been a high-profile case, as well as the gang matters that she has. I think there are a couple of those, and the elections, the elections interference matter as well. But again, it was a lump sum, not specific with line item details.
Right. So you think that was in her budget request, perhaps in 23? Are we talking about Young Thug trial that's been it's gone on forever and ever so far, or different gang-related?
I believe there is more than one gang-related, large-scale prosecutorial matter. But yes, sir, that would be one of them.
And you think she may have also itemized the election interference case would require additional funds, or categorize that as an area of needed funding?
Yes, sir. Again, I would have to go back and look. Well, I don't, because
You don't have to go back anymore. You've got your right-hand woman right there to help you.
So, yes, sir. That was Sabrina McTier, the county's budget manager. So this is from the 23 budget enhancement request, and the description says, and I'll just read it, the general rule: the more complicated a case, the more likely expert witnesses, e.g. professional services, are needed. That was in parentheses. State versus Tex MacGyver has been remanded to this office. This case alone cost $675,000 in professional services. I have this case and several anti-corruption cases that are being litigated in 23. It is sufficient to enhance this budget, and the request was $1.1 million.
So that was for Tex MacGyver and any other public corruption case?
Yes, sir. So that's the kind of description that I was perhaps not doing a very good job of expressing, but
You're doing great. And as far as your recollection, Chairman Pitts, is that she never named that she would need a special prosecutor on any election interference case?
Not that I recall, sir.
Certainly never told you the names of who she might be hiring or how much she was going to have to pay them.
Not that I recall, sir.
Did she make other budget enhancement requests back in 2023, 21, or 22? I can't remember exactly when she was sworn in. Y'all know?
Madam DA was sworn in and began her term in 2021. So we did receive enhancement requests from her for the 22 budget cycle, the 23, and the 24.
Okay. What was the $5 million enhancement request for clearing up homicide backlogs? Do y'all recall that? That was testified to here last meeting.
That was a request that came through in the middle of 2021. She requested additional staff to support a number of items, the outstanding homicide situation being one of them. Ultimately, in 2021, through a budget amendment process that we call budget soundings, the Board of Commissioners did authorize her to have funding for an additional 55 positions.
Wow.
It was a mix of attorneys, investigators, and administrative support personnel. And in 21, the cost that was necessary to begin to onboard those positions, because she would not be able to do all 55 at one time, was less than $800,000. I think the budget soundings was $780,000 and some change. But the full annual cost for that is the $5 million. And so we built that in then to her 2022 budget with the full year funding for all of the positions that the board awarded her mid-year in 2021.
And was there any mention in that $5 million enhancement request that would be needed for any type of public corruption investigation?
I will have to go back to the source document to confirm that.
What do you call that source document? Because I'm going to want to make sure I have adequately identified what I need to be produced.
I would call it a budget soundings request.
Okay. And can you provide those to me without me submitting an additional subpoena? I think they're included in what I've asked for. I may not have been as specific because I didn't know what to call it.
Yes, sir. I had intended to include the 2021 soundings information as part of the request for the budget information that was already included.
And you can just follow up and get that to me or Secretary Cook at your convenience. And if you would do that for any of those sounding requests for 21, 22, 23, and 24, just to keep me up to speed. Because, Chairman Pitts, what I am hearing from you is that the Board of Commissioners never got any kind of specific request for additional funding to prosecute any election interference cases, other than that generic $1 million, in 23.
Not that I recall, sir.
And no specific information about who needed to be hired as an independent contractor or what they would cost. I understand Governor Barnes was too expensive, and I just didn't know if that's that y'all figured that out or she ruled him out for that reason.
No, not that I recall.
I am subject to hire an amount.
He's a gun for hire if anybody out there is paying attention, and pleasure to have you in the audience with us today, Governor Barnes. And I'm just wanting us to get a feel and for exactly how much oversight there is. It sounds like it's very loose as far as employment practices and expenditures for independent contractors.
Yeah, that information doesn't come before the board.
Right. Only you have to peel it out in these soundings and in the annual audit and in the budget submissions as she gives you the categories of what she needs.
That's correct. And when budget soundings come before the board, there's a little more detail and more specifics.
Right. Probably pretty difficult politically for you and the Board of Commissioners to reject a request for needed funding to clear up a backlog in homicide cases, right?
Well, I mean, we had such a tremendous number of cases that were so-called, had been there for up in the thousands. And we decided that the $75 million from the ARPA funds has already been referenced by Ms. Whitmore.
Right.
So in order to, we threw, $75 million of the, I think we received a total federal allocation of about $206 million in ARPA funds, and $75 million of that $206 million went to the justice system.
Right.
And the justice system meaning everything that the CFO has outlined.
So that was back in the fall of 2021. It was about the same time Mr. Wade was being hired. And it wasn't mentioned to you that any of the enhanced money was going to go towards Mr. Wade or any other special prosecutor to prosecute election interference.
No, it was my understanding that that $75 million was to be used for the justice system, and specifically, sort of specifically, to reduce the tremendous backlog that we had.
And there was a $5 million enhancement that was from county funds, not the Orca funds, or is that the same money?
Is that the same money?
No. The $5 million is general fund.
Okay.
County.
And in that request, that was on top of the Orca funds to get rid of the backlog of homicide cases.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. She actually asked for over 100 positions. When she made the request, and the way in which we addressed it was we already had the backlog program in development, and so we identified a certain number that would be funded through the backlog project out of the ARPA resources, and the balance we provided for out of the county's general fund.
And this is back in the fall of 2021.
Yes, sir.
2 years before her $1.1 million request for public corruption and Tex MacGyver.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did she ever report back to you the progress being made? What kind of bang you were getting for your buck? You're giving her tens of millions of dollars in either Orca funds or federal, state, county general funds to get rid of this backlog. Did she do it?
I don't recall any specific report back to the board from the district attorney. However, at each meeting of the board, we would receive an update on progress that was being made. That's accurate, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, sir. As part of our global pandemic response, we presented the Board of Commissioners with an update for a while at every board meeting, and then eventually at just one meeting a month, to update them on our progress using our ARPA resources, and specifically on the backlog project, showing total backlog cases, progression of those cases through the system. And so we've been reporting on that regularly up until February of this year due to our cyber incident. So we are almost ready to begin that reporting process. Again, the last report that we made of the progress of Project Orca was in January, at the second meeting of the Board of Commissioners in January, and that was for progress through the end of 2023.
So would that list the number of homicide cases that are pending and how many are being resolved on a monthly basis?
It doesn't list case type. It lists the total number of projects the total number of cases by each of the players, if you will, the solicitor, the in the magistrate court, the district attorney, and then superior court and state court. So we kind of track the progress of the cases from the two prosecutors, from the solicitor and the district attorney, into their respective courts, and then we track the progress that the courts themselves are making in fully adjudicating the cases. So that information is all presented to the board in a chart and discussion, and what's happening, all the various different things that we had to do in order to see that line make the progression that we were looking for.
So how many backlog cases were there? Do you have a ballpark figure how bad this got back in 2021? We're a year into the pandemic. Courts are not trying cases. And oh, my, you got a full color report there. Is that in my notebook?
We'll get an exact number. It was.
We started our drop date that we used to define our backlog cases was December 6, 2021,
Okay.
And we started with a total of 148,209 open and active cases in any stage.
That included solicitor's office
Yes.
that prosecutes
Yes.
misdemeanors.
Across the
and
justice
DA's
system.
office that prosecutes the felony offenses.
Yes, sir.
Does it break them out? How many are state court versus superior court?
The state court, the starting point for the state court was 20,124.
So the vast majority of them, or at least 2/3 of them. What's the superior court?
Superior court was 15,888.
Okay. Then you got magistrate courts as well, I guess. Or
Magistrate court was 39,435.
and that can be everything from a speeding ticket to parking ticket, very minor things.
Variety of,
Okay.
yes, sir.
What else you got? Municipal court, I guess?
Solicitor, the Solicitor General had 56,462 at the starting point. And the district attorney had 16,300.
Okay. Where's the 16.3 now, or at the end of 2023? Has the DA used all these millions to any good to catch up?
From our report in January, the district attorney's number was 130 cases that were the original Orca. So this is only tracking the cases that were considered in the Orca backlog that started at 148. So again, these resources were only supposed to be focused on reducing those cases. There were still new cases, of course, that come into the system since that point in time.
Right.
And this report does not talk about those. This is specifically focused on those Orca cases.
Those new ones are not funded through the Orca funding.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Repeat those two numbers at the start. January.
For who?
Start for the DA, you started at 16,300 and ended up with 130.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was from all
December 6th of 2021 through 12/31/2023.
And we can't discern whether they're dismissed cases, whether they're plea bargain cases, or trials to a verdict.
Not from this report, no,
Okay.
sir.
They just got out of the system, resolved one way or another.
So for the district attorney, they were either moved on to Superior Court, which is where her cases would typically go, which means she still has to then prosecute them. But what we were tracking is, the cases that she had where, they were still sitting in, per se, in her queue, if you will.
Yeah.
So from 16.3 down to 130, they either moved on into the further into the prosecutorial process, or yes, they were dismissed, or whatever the other term is that you would use when a court case doesn't progress, when a matter doesn't progress.
Did your reporting requirements for these Orca funds require any detail as to the successful completion of a case, whether there was a conviction or a plea, or they just dismissed it, or did they break it down for you that way? Or just one lump sum number of these cases are resolved, they're no longer in our system, in our queue?
We did not require that reporting, that level of reporting to the Board of Commissioners. We do have, I believe, that level of reporting from our criminal justice system, but it's just not included in what we reported to the board.
And does that criminal justice system of Fulton County prepare a report giving those annual updates or dispositions of cases?
They have not. This is something that the executive team worked on. For Project Orca, there was a steering committee that was established that, like the chief judge of Superior Court, chief judge of State Court, magistrate court, chief judge, the clerk of Superior Magistrate Court, they all participated in the steering committee process. Our former COO, Alton Adams, guided them through that process. So there was no explicit reporting requirement for that detailed level of information made by the board to the group, but the board did want to see, you know, the results of their efforts. So, you know, Mr. Alton worked with the judicial partners in developing the information that was reported back to the Board of Commissioners.
So you think that criminal coordinating council, or whatever they're called, kept data that specific as to the outcomes of the cases?
I think it's in our justice, it's in our system and can be pulled out. I don't know. I didn't participate in those sessions, so I don't really know what they did with that information.
Who would you recommend me asking to pull that data out? Who should I submit a request for, ask to come testify to us?
Yeah, probably Alton, wasn't it?
Perhaps Mr. Adams, Alton
He's
Adams.
no longer the COO?
He is semi-retired. He is continuing to work with the county
Contract.
as a fee-based employee to help us move further down the road with the potential replacement jail project.
Mr. Adams, a fee-based employee? Does that mean he's still working just on an hourly basis?
Yes,
or
sir.
Kind of a consulting type thing?
Project more specific to the project, the replacement jail project.
Okay, so that's the project, replacement jail project?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. All right, this might be a nice time for a little break. Would you guys appreciate or need a little bathroom break, a little stretch your legs type thing? We're going to recess for about 10, maybe 15 minutes here, and then I'll try to start wrapping some things up. But I know it's a broad range of questions, but you're helping educate our committee. Thank you so much. We'll take a break. We'll accommodate this little break, keep everybody comfortable, and we will try to forge ahead here in short order. My intention always is for these meetings to last 2 to 3 hours. I think you kind of lose your energy if we go much longer than that, and it's such an imposition on you witnesses that have agreed to come. So we'll try to wrap this up in about an hour or so, and making good progress so far. I want to finish up a few of my thoughts, sort of the traveling down certain roads, and then Ms. Joe, I want to get you to give me a little information from the county attorney's perspective, so I'm happy to have you sitting there. Okay, Mr. Pitts, we were talking about the special outside counsel, the approval of it, and essentially this Orca project and what its goals and intents were, and how it has successfully eliminated a lot of that backlog of the criminal cases that piled up during COVID. So you, as a commission, dedicated significant resources, both from the federal ARPA funds and from the county's coffers, to help staff up the DA's office in order to work through that backlog of cases, we'll call it. Mm-hmm. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. And it sounds like there was some accountability, at least telling the reduction in the cases, right, Ms. Whitmore, from what you were telling us, they are reporting on a regular basis as the progress that was made on those cases?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Maybe not as specific as I would love to see as what the disposition of the cases was, but we might be able to find that out through this other counsel. You got to tell me the name of it again, the judicial court system, what was it called?
It was the steering committee for Project Orca.
All right. And they would probably be able to give me a more thorough explanation of what happened to those cases.
Yes, sir.
So basically, was the DA's office good stewards of the funds that you allocated to them to accomplish the purposes that you gave that money for? Is that fair enough to say we're trying to monitor that somehow?
Through the reporting, yes, sir.
Okay. You could leave that microphone instead of having back and forth it if you want to.
It's habit.
Okay. So, Mr. Pitts, I'm summarizing briefly, but it sounds like the DA has pretty wide discretion how they spend the money that you appropriate to them, and does not have to basically get any type of pre-approval for hiring independent special counsel to assist in the activities of the DA's office.
That's correct.
Okay. And doesn't have to even report back to you how the money was spent or who was hired as a independent contractor and how much they were paid.
That's correct.
Okay. Did the previous DA seek prior approval or use this mechanism of special prosecutors?
Sure. Oh, did he? I can't remember, Paul. I don't recall the previous Mr. Howard.
Yeah, and Paul Howard was
right.
the DA for what, 20 years or so, right?
Quite a while.
Yeah.
Ever using a special prosecutor. He could have. I just don't recall.
Okay.
You?
No, I don't recall. I would have to research that.
Would you take a look at that? Because I haven't uncovered any use of special assistant district attorneys by the prior district attorney who was in office for a couple of decades.
Yeah, I believe that request number 12 at least would cover 4 years of Mr. Howard's tenure.
All
And
right.
it's for outside counsel by the Office of the District Attorney from 2016 to 2020. So I think that would cover that item.
You would be able to ascertain whether he had ever even utilized this device or this mechanism to sort of bolster his manpower in the DA's office.
During that period of time, yes, sir.
Okay. And I didn't want to be overly burdensome and ask you to go beyond 4 years back, because I think that would capture the contrast between the two administrations. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, are you satisfied with the transparency and the disclosures, or the kind of keeping you in the loop by the DA's office on her use of special prosecutors?
Well, I mean, we've never had this situation before. I just don't recall under her predecessor, Mr. Howard, using a special prosecutor. So this is sort of new territory. Now with outside counsel, that's different because that is recommended by the county attorney.
On behalf of the county?
Yes.
In civil matters?
Yes.
Okay. But you don't have recollection in all your years of service of previous DAs ever utilizing a special assistant district attorney?
Not that I recall, no, sir.
If they did, it was never brought to your attention or disclosed or publicized so that you would know about it?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think your position is that as a board, it's been communicated to you by the DA's office that she does not need your prior approval of such contracts.
Well, let me make sure I understand that.
The DA doesn't feel like she needs the prior approval of the county commission to hire independent contractors?
Well, technically and legally, she does not with respect to special prosecutors under these very, as I understand, very narrow circumstances, and I'm not sure how that's defined.
Well, let me help you with that, because this process is set forth in the Official Code of Georgia, annotated Title 15-18-20. And I'll just read it into the record here. Under subparagraph A, the district attorney in each judicial circuit may employ such additional assistant district attorneys, deputy district attorneys, or other attorneys, investigators, paraprofessionals, clerical assistants, victim and witness assistance personnel, and other employees or independent contractors, as may be provided for by local law or as may be authorized by the governing authority of the county or counties comprising the judicial circuit. Now, Fulton County is a single county judicial circuit, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you are the governing authority as the Board of Commissioners of that county.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what you're saying is that you have never authorized her hiring independent contractors to assist in the prosecution of her duties.
That's correct. It wasn't required.
Well, this law requires it, but the county did not require it?
Well, the distinction, again, that I make is a distinction between with outside counsel and the special prosecutor. It was always my understanding that the district attorney had the authority to hire a special prosecutor as he or she saw the need to do so.
And that's the position that Ms. Willis has stated to you as chairman of the commission, that she was not required to get prior approval or authority to hire Mr. Wade or anybody else for that matter.
Well, I didn't have a direct conversation with her about that, but that's just the way it is, and the way our understanding was that because it's a special prosecutor, it did not have to come before the board for approval. And I was asked that question quite a bit by the members of the media. Said, did this have to come before the board? And in researching it, we concluded that it did not.
All right. I'm going to ask your county attorney to help me with that research, because she and I have had conversations about any court interpretations of this statute as we flesh that out. As the commission chairman, would it be your preference that DA or other constitutional officers should seek your approval before hiring independent contractors that you are responsible for paying for?
Yeah, that's the difference. Repeat that. Let me make sure I understand you, sir.
As the county commission chairman,
yes, sir,
would it be your preference that the district attorney did have to seek your approval before going out and hiring special prosecutors or independent contractors? If you're paying for it, or your general fund is.
Well, but under the, the current law, as I understand the current law, as it relates to constitutional officers and this, and the district attorney does not fall under that like the sheriff and the others do, but sorta, and she's sort of a state constitutional officer, as I understand it. So a little different.
Part of the job of this committee is to determine whether we need to change the law. If it's unclear in this case, and I'm wondering if you are the lawmaker here, would you like to see state law changed so that a district attorney would have to ask your prior approval before going out and entering into contracts with special prosecutors?
Well, probably my opinion may be a little different because I focus on the money, and I'm always want to follow the money from fiscal conservative and like to know how the money is being spent. But with respect to a district attorney, hiring who she or he or she believes that they need to. I mean, I don't have any issue with that, but I would like to know how the money is being spent.
So
Not who, but how.
We're back to the keeping you informed and the transparency of this process. If a DA is allowed to unilaterally hire whomever they want to at whatever price they want to pay them, do you feel like the county government ought to be able to be kept in the loop on this and reported to as to how your money was spent?
Well, in the loop, yes, there's no doubt about that.
Okay. And you don't feel like this process has been transparent so far?
Well, to the extent that we have not, we were not advised of the hiring and not that it was required, of a special prosecutor, nor the payment, hourly rate or whatever the rate was. I mean, we were just following the law, and obviously I'd like to have more information, but that was the law at the time, and is the law at the time, as I understand the law.
In your opinion, has DA Willis been forthcoming or transparent with you and the commission as to her utilization of special assistant district attorney in this election integrity case?
Well, to the extent that this is all new ground for us and for all of us, and
that's because it wasn't utilized by the prior district attorney for the last 20 years before her election.
Well, this whole issue with election integrity, election interference, and all of that is new territory for us, and we're sort of, feeling our way as we go through this, even with the trying to work down the backlog of cases that we had. So we were sort of making up rules as we went along, to be honest with you.
Sure. Do you worry that she was utilizing resources for prosecuting a election integrity case rather than getting rid of this backlog of 40,000 criminal cases?
Would you repeat that?
Does it worry you that she was spending significant resources without prior approval or even any reporting or accountability pursuing an election integrity case rather than working on this backlog of 40,000 criminal cases that were pending in Fulton County? It might have been 56,000. I can't remember all my numbers. It was a lot total.
Well, as I said earlier, and as the CFO said earlier, we appropriated $75 million of the $206 million of the ARPA money that we received to the justice system. And she had, in addition to the backlogs, she is currently involved with the YSL case and the election interference case. So those were, three really unusual cases that I had never experienced before. So we were trying to be as helpful to her as we can and could by providing, for the most part, the resources that she asked. But as far as what happened to the resources, the money, when I say resources, I mean the money that we gave her, we, after it was given to her, we tracked the cases, the backlogs, and the jury is still out on the YSL and the election interference. So we'll get it all come out in the wash, I suppose, as to how effective it's all been.
And
we provided what was asked for, and we've not asked for, nor have we been provided any interim reports as to how we're proceeding, other than with the backlogs.
So she hadn't really told you how she spent the money?
No, sir.
Okay, so you gave her $75 million plus at least another $5 million.
It wasn't just to her. There was a whole justice system at $75 million. Right?
That's
yes,
correct.
it wasn't just to her.
Right. You gave her many millions of dollars to get caught up on a backlog of criminal prosecutions.
Yes.
Okay. And when you did that, there was no mention of any election integrity case, was there? That didn't really ever come up specifically, just this one sounding for additional money in 2023.
I believe that's correct. When you say
Which
that's
is-
correct.
The 1.1 million for Tex MacGyver and public corruption is the only thing that could specifically have reference to an election integrity case.
In her enhancement request, yes, sir.
And it wasn't in her budgetary request either, was it? Anything about election integrity?
It would have, if it was for additional resources, it would have come through as an enhancement request.
So as a commission, you weren't aware that you were funding a election interference case, certainly not before 2023, which would have been 3 years after the election. That's
I think that's correct.
okay. And you haven't been given any information to tell you where the money that you did give her through Orca funds or other things were spent.
Well, whatever part of that 75 million that she received, and whether how much was used for the backlog, how much was used for the YSL case, and how much was used for the election interference case, and we don't know.
Yeah.
And we're not being given any information other than with the backlog. Now,
Is
that's probably easier to quantify. I don't know how she would give us, or any district attorney for that matter, would give us a report on how the case is going until it's concluded.
Understood.
Yeah.
But she could have told you how your money was being spent that you had awarded to her, whether it was being spent on the backlog of cases versus public corruption cases versus, Tex MacGyver or whoever. She would have been able to give you that data,
Could have, yes, sir.
but she didn't.
Did not, and we didn't ask either.
Okay. And that's partly because she's taken this stance that she's a constitutional officer and doesn't have to give you that information.
That's probably a correct statement.
Okay. Well, let me turn to you, Ms. Joe. You and I have had conversations before today about whether or not a district attorney has to get prior approval and authorization of funding from the county commission when utilizing this independent contractor, special prosecutor device that the legislature gave the ability through Title 15-18-20A. You heard me read that relevant portions of the statute, and you would agree just at face value that would seem to require a DA to obtain approval from the governing authority before hiring an independent contractor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But I think, make sure you're on.
I would agree that the plain language of the statute certainly seems to indicate that the governing authority needs to be consulted and approve such an appointment.
All right, now, so tell us who you are. You're the county
sorry.
attorney. Give me just a little bit of background on you.
My name is Sue Joe, and I am the county attorney for Fulton County, which means that I am the essentially in-house general counsel for the corporation that is Fulton County. And my office handles civil matters for the entire county, provides defense and legal advice and counsel to the Board of Commissioners.
And in your role as county attorney, were you ever asked to interpret this statute or do legal research to find out whether or not Ms. Willis should have gotten prior approval or whether she was required to do that before going out and hiring independent counsel?
I don't recall if there was a specific request, but of course, I keep up with current events, and when this issue came up, I did have the occasion to look into the matter and research it.
Give us your legal opinion as to whether or not prior approval is required. You've agreed that the plain language of the statute would indicate that. Have there been judicial interpretations of this statute that cloud those matters?
So let me begin by saying that the statute, OCGA 15-18-20, that you were reading from, deals with assistant district attorneys. So it's not explicitly giving the DA permission to appoint special district assistant district attorneys. In case law, that statute
It does
has
say
been.
independent contractors, though, right?
It does,
Okay.
which we, that is the classification for special prosecutors in Fulton County in terms of how they are employed.
Is there another statute that specifically addresses special independent counsel or prosecutors, whatever the
I
phrase
have
may
not
be?
found one. And what I was going to say is that the case law that I have reviewed that has interpreted this statute says that while it is not explicitly mentioning special assistant district attorneys, that is included in the general authority provided under the statute to district attorneys. So in at least 3 Georgia Court of Appeal cases, what I have found is that the court has rejected the proposition that this particular statute requires a district attorney to obtain explicit permission from a county prior to appointing a special assistant district attorney. And in fact, the original case, the court noted that
Give us that citation, because
So
this
that-
is kind of instructive to the legislature. Do we need to amend this
Clarify.
statute to clarify? And so you help me with my legal research. What's that citation?
So I'm sure the Attorney General's office would be happy to provide their official advice, but what I will, I'll begin by just saying what the citations are of the 3 cases that I reviewed. One of them is Greater Georgia Amusements at 317 Georgia Appeals 116, which cites to State versus Cook at 172 Georgia Appeals 433, and is referenced again in Amusement Sales Incorporated versus State of Georgia. And if you'll excuse me, let me look at my Westlaw. Okay, that's going to be at 316 Georgia Appeals 727. And all of them include a construction of OCGA 151820 that indicates the DA does not ADA does not have to have explicit permission from the county in order to appoint a special assistant district attorney, and that the employment may be pursuant to whatever private arrangements regarding compensation are mutually agreeable to the district attorney and the appointee. That is a quote from State versus Cook that is contained in Greater Georgia Amusements.
Okay. So judicial interpretation of our statute essentially eviscerate the plain meaning or language of the statute.
Well, I will say I was definitely surprised at the construction in that it seems to be at odds with the plain language of the statute, but that is the current state of Georgia law as far as I can find it.
Okay. And in your role as county attorney, do you seek approval from the Board of Commissioners for hiring, we'll just call them outside counsel, to represent the county's interest in certain civil matters?
Absolutely. That is considered, that travels under a separate ordinance regarding the engagement of outside counsel. So for example, it could be an official of the county is sued, requests representation. If there is some reason why my office doesn't have the capacity to take it on directly, I may recommend the engagement of outside counsel, and I will bring that to the Board of Commissioners for their approval.
Okay. And that's pursuant to a county ordinance that requires that type of approval of both funneled through your office and submitted to the county commission?
Yes, sir. The Fulton County Plan of Defense governs what types of circumstances in which we can provide defense as a county, and also the way in which that provision is made. It is either made through my office or through outside counsel. Even if it is provided through my office, I still go to the Board of Commissioners, present the case, indicate why it's covered under the Plan of Defense, and ask for authority to represent.
Is there a similar county ordinance that references or applies to prosecutors?
There is not.
Okay. So you only refer back to the state law for that?
Yes.
Okay. In your role as county attorney, are you responsible for responding to open records requests?
Yes, the custodian of records was established in recent years and centralized as an individual who's designated from among the attorneys in my office.
So that is an attorney that responds to those complaints?
It is an attorney
Or
who
request.
oversees the
Production.
response operation.
So that's under the control of your office then, or?
The intake and coordination of the response is within my office, the county attorney's office. Obviously, we are not the custodians of most of the documents that are requested, so we have to coordinate that, with designated open records liaison within each custodial department.
Do you, in your office, respond to open records requests submitted to the district attorney's office?
She has the ability to handle the entire open records process separately from the county as a state official. Historically, the district attorney's office has both utilized my office as the point of origin and liaison, and then at times has chosen to opt out of that. Currently, this district attorney for Fulton County does receive her Open Records Act request through the Open Records custodian in my office.
And if counsel is needed to respond to those requests or object to them or litigate disputes over open records requests, is that something provided by you for the district attorney, or does she handle that herself?
So having it routed through my office is a fairly recent circumstance with our district attorney's office, but now that it is within my office, any questions as to exemptions and what is subject to public disclosure under the Open Records Act would be referred to my attorneys in my office, and we would assist with that and provide guidance.
And is your office actively providing guidance or legal counsel to the DA's office in any open records requests or litigation arising from those at this time?
At this time, yes.
Okay. Does she opt out of utilizing your services on occasion? Handle them in-house, so to speak?
I did not mean to imply that it was a case-by-case basis. There was a period of time in which the point of contact was not my office. My office was not involved in the process. But as of, I would have to check to confirm when, but it would be at least several months ago, perhaps a bit longer. She has opted to utilize my office as the initial point of contact and to provide that type of guidance again.
Was she using your office for a point of contacts and guidance and sort of legal services during the open records requests that Ashley Merchant submitted this past fall?
I would have to confirm that. I don't know exactly when that came in.
Okay. But here in the last few months, District Attorney Willis has begun to utilize your office as the point of contact for receiving open records requests and for responding to them?
That's not exactly accurate. For receiving and for coordinating and providing advice, but in many instances, the custodial departments will upload their own responsive documents. So when we advise them of what is being requested, provide any legal guidance that may be necessary, are a point of contact for communication to provide status updates to the requesting party. But because the custodial department may have more immediate access, or if it is in the case of voluminous responsive documents or documents with restricted access within those departments, the department itself is often the ones who will upload the documents into our software that is used for Open Records Act requests.
So if I submit tomorrow an opens records request to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, maybe I want to find out what happened to those 16,000 cases that Orca was supposedly funding. Who will respond to that? Does the DA's office respond to me, or do they route it through you and you give me a response?
My expectation would be that someone on the Open Records team in my office would be the initial point of contact and say, thank you for your request. We understand you've requested XYZ documents. Either here are your documents, or we estimate that it will take a certain amount of time to gather the documents that we believe are responsive and within our custody. And then that they would keep you updated or be available should you call in or email in with a question as to status.
And if the district attorney did not want to provide the documentation I requested, would she object to that, instruct you to object to that, or does your office make that determination?
So I don't know that we have a long enough history to have a representative sampling of all the different potential circumstances, but my expectation of the process would be that we would communicate what was requested, that her office would identify whether or not they had responsive documents, and that they would work with my office to identify the subset of those documents that do not fall under any type of exemption, for example, pending investigations or any of the statutory exemptions that are provided for in state law.
Okay. And so what happens if she says, I ain't giving that information up?
I am not aware of such a circumstance. In some instances, the response we get from the departments may include, we do not have any responsive documents. And that is how sometimes disputes arise, because the requesting party may believe that they exist, and the custodial department asserts that they do not exist.
Okay, what if they say, yep, they exist, but nope, I'm not giving them to you? You know they exist, your custodial people figured it out, it's public records.
To my knowledge, that response has not occurred. But if it did, I would expect my Open Records team to review the statutory obligations under the Open Records Act with the custodial department to emphasize and impress upon them their legal obligation to provide the documents that are subject to the Open Records Act.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you about the county ordinance concerning reporting of gifts from vendors or independent contractors. Does Fulton County have such a policy?
I believe, and I haven't reviewed that specifically for today, but I believe you are referring to the prohibitions that are contained in our ethics code.
Yes. So
Yes,
what does your ethics code of Fulton County provide as far as the receipt of gifts from independent contractors or other vendors of the county or its agencies?
If I could have a moment, I could try to pull that up, but just off the top of my head from previous reviews, there's a lot of language in our ethics code about appearance of impropriety, appearance of conflicts, avoiding appearance of conflicts. So my advice, if I were asked, would always be to avoid it altogether. However, there are certain customary gifts, chocolates at Christmas time, Christmas gifts, etc., things that are shared among everyone in the office. As long as it's of nominal value, and I believe the cutoff is $100.
That sounds
There is a nominal value that is allowed under our ethics code, but anything of significance beyond that is considered to be prohibited.
And is it prohibited to receive it, or are you required to report it?
I can't recall if it's a report. I want to say it's a reporting requirement, and the reason I can't recall is because I like to stay as far away from the line as possible, so my preference would be to not receive it. But it may be a reporting requirement. If you would like a certain answer, I can check either on a break
Sure.
or at some
I'll
point
let you
in
do that
proceedings.
for me. Do you believe that ethics code applies to the district attorney or other constitutional officers of Fulton County?
I'm not sure what the intent was when the code was originally enacted, but I know that there has been a determination by the Board of Ethics, which has purview over adjudicating matters relating to the ethics code, that it does not apply to the district attorney. And in a related occurrence, we have had a recent piece of legislation updating the ethics code in Fulton County to add, I believe the amendment is a sentence that specifically indicates that the ethics code applies to all elected officials in Fulton County.
Do you know why? Why this clarification?
I did not, I was not the sponsor of the legislation, so I cannot speak for the commissioner who sponsored it. But I do know that it was subsequent in time to the decision of the ethics board that the district attorney was not covered by our code of ethics.
So there was an ethics complaint brought about the receipt of gifts, and it was determined that your existing ordinance or code, ethics code, did not apply.
Yes, sir. The Board of Ethics determined that it did not have jurisdiction under the current ethics code.
And the county commission has subsequently here in recent months amended that ethics code to make it clear that it does apply to constitutional officers such as the DA and the sheriff and the tax commissioner.
Yes, I believe that was passed on April 17th or thereabouts.
Yeah, very recently. All right, Mr. Chairman, tell us about that.
Well, I can't add anything to what the county attorney has said. It came about, and I supported it when it came up. There's some loopholes, so we're trying to close all loopholes.
Is it and so that is now, has been enacted, a recent ordinance or ethics code for the county?
Yes, sir.
And it now does require the district attorney and other constitutional officers to disclose gifts of more than a nominal amount.
I think that's how it's worded. But it covers the district attorney and others, all elected officials.
Right. What about reporting of gifts that are above $100 or a nominal amount? Are you required to report those or simply banned from receiving them?
I'd have to check the exact language in the code.
Sue will be looking while we talk. So just on a sort of philosophical level,
Yes, sir.
why do you feel like that was needed or that type of ban is appropriate for elected officials, including constitutional officers?
Well, I wasn't the sponsor of the legislation,
Right.
but
You voted for it? Or,
I voted for it, yeah, to close any loophole, so to remove any doubt as to, who's covered, who's not covered, because the idea is for us to be open and transparent about what we're doing.
Okay. And is there an appearance of impropriety if you were to receive kickbacks or things of benefit from folks that were contractors or vendors of the county?
Okay, repeat that one.
Is there an appearance of impropriety or wrongdoing for elected officials to receive kickbacks or things of benefit from vendors or independent contractors of the county?
Well, I would say if it's over whatever that amount is, then that would be a problem.
Okay. And is the reason is that your independent judgment and acting on behalf of the people brought into question if you're receiving things of benefit from those that you're doing business with?
Well, I mean, we want to be above reproach. I guess that's used quite a bit by elected officials, and that's the intent, so that we are above reproach and that we are open and fair in our dealings. And we have blackout periods where we cannot even contact to those who are seeking to do business with the county.
Even though it was recently determined that the ethics provisions did not apply to constitutional officers, did DA Willis fill those type of disclosure forms out, those gift forms, in the past?
I'm not aware of it. I don't know about that.
Okay.
I've not seen.
What about
Any
Paul
filings.
Howard? Did he fill those type of forms out in the past?
Have no knowledge of that. Yeah.
Guess he wasn't using independent contractors anyway, right?
I don't recall him using the special prosecutor. So I'm not aware.
Has the
'Cause
county
I have not reviewed what other elected officials are, reporting.
Has the county commission ever come in and asked any agency heads or constitutional officers to terminate or void or alter any contracts with independent contractors or vendors?
Okay, repeat the question.
Has the county commission ever come in and asked for department heads or constitutional officers to terminate or void or amend or change any contracts that they might have entered into with independent contractors or outside vendors?
The question is, has the county ever asked someone to void an independent vendor contract? I don't know that that's, we've not, no, all you did was pull the funding. You did not ask them to void the contract.
Here's a recent contract, not, excuse me, not involving the district attorney, but we didn't ask the department head to. We did not ask the department head to terminate the contract. We simply terminated the funding of the contract, and the effect of that was to terminate the contract.
And in Ms. Willis's case, you wouldn't have been able to terminate her contract with Mr. Wade because you can't control the funding of that?
All right, let me make sure I understand the question.
So Ms. Wade had a contract with Mr. Wade to be special prosecutor as an independent contractor. And you have not asked her to terminate that agreement. The judge ultimately did, but a county commission never.
The board did not.
Okay.
No, sir.
And was that because you approved of that arrangement or because you didn't think you had the authority to require her to terminate that arrangement?
Because we did not have the authority, because she had the authority to hire the special prosecutor.
When did that first come to your attention, or the board's attention, that she had entered into a contract for a special prosecutor, Mr. Wade, to handle this election integrity case?
Me personally?
Yeah.
During the media coverage on it.
So you didn't even know it until the media erupted back in the fall sometime?
That's correct.
What was your response or your reaction, both personally as in your capacity as chairman of the commission?
Well, since we believe that we did not have any control over her decisions, that it was her decision to hire the special prosecutor, that we had no role in it.
Could you have cut the funding off for that, just like you did this other contract recently?
We didn't know anything about it.
So it had not even been disclosed to you as a commission?
No, sir.
Okay. What are your views on the propriety of elected official hiring somebody under an independent contract arrangement that they had an intimate personal relationship with?
Well, here are my personal views on.
Yeah.
I think I believe our revised code of ethics covers a situation like that. It's been amended. Is that correct?
The revised code that you support would prohibit that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It was, the definition, I think, was expanded to include personal relationships.
Yeah. Ms. Joe, can you elucidate us any on this? You're leaning forward in your seat as if you might have some information for me there.
I did not intend to lean forward like that.
Be careful, I'm watching.
I don't want to speak for the chairman, but I believe the recent enactment that he is referring to is a new anti-nepotism policy
Right.
that would cover personal relationships of this nature between an official and an independent contractor.
Okay. Is that a new ordinance as well?
It
has that
is.
been there?
It is. Our prior ordinance was located within the Civil Service Act, so it was limited in its application to employees and would not have applied to independent contractors.
Would it have applied to employees of the DA's office?
Yes.
Okay. So if Mr. Wade had been hired as an assistant DA, it would have violated the then existing nepotism policy?
Assuming that they had that type of relationship, yes.
I think that's been admitted by both parties at this point, right? You keep up with the press, correct? I mean,
Yes, but in our hypothetical, I mean, it depends on the timing.
yeah. So the amendment was to expand on your existing anti-nepotism clause that would prohibit superior from having a relationship, intimate relationship with an employee, to include independent contractors in that ban.
In effect, yes,
Okay.
it expands it, but it had to do it through a separate policy because the original policy is within our Civil Service Act and therefore limited in application to employees. So there is a separate policy that is a county-wide application that prohibits all of the same things that also applies to independent contractors because it is not limited by the scope of the Civil Service Act.
And that was enacted when?
I believe that would also be April.
Right.
Was it April?
So both of
April
these,
17th as well.
both of these, your ethics policies, your anti-nepotism, your gift,
Have recently
Yes.
been expanded.
and they were expanded to capture this type of situation that we're dealing with here with Ms. Willis and Mr. Wade.
Had they been in place, both would have captured this, would have applied in this instance.
Okay. And was there any rationale for not including independent contractors in the past, or was that just an oversight?
That is well, I will say these are all fairly well-established older policies, but as to the anti-nepotism policy specifically, I think the limitation is simply where it was located, which is the Civil Service Act.
And because it was located in that act, it was not deemed
It
to
could not apply to anyone but employees.
Okay. Do you know whether the district attorney's office has a separate sort of ethics guideline or ordinance or rules?
I'm not aware. I presume there are state guidelines that would apply as being a state officer, but I'm not aware of any that are specific to her office.
Okay. One of the things that was brought forward in one of our previous hearings is that Ms. Willis entered into an independent contract for essentially a publicist, a PR firm to help guide and monitor publicity. Is that the type of contract that the county would need to approve or fund?
I'm not aware of that contract, but it would, again, back to this constitutional officer and her being somewhat of a constitutional officer. I mean, there's a sheriff, the tax commissioner, and a couple of others that are a little different from the district attorney. But if she had, and your question is about the district attorney,
Yeah.
if she had the funds in her budget, then she could, without coming to us, coming back to the board seeking approval.
Did she ever ask for funding for a PR firm out of New York City in her different budget requests? Is that anything in the line item, Ms. Whitmore? She was asking for $36 million. She explained part of it would be spent for a New York City PR firm to monitor her publicity.
Not that I recall. I would have to research that.
Mr. Chairman, is that something that the Board of Commissioners would ordinarily approve or budget for various departments?
Well, again, if that's not something that we would, as a matter of course, routinely be aware of, and I can't recall ever of a request like that coming before the board. But if it's in a department's budget, particularly a constitutional officer's budget, and he or she feels that that's what they need, then if they have the funds under this umbrella of a constitutional officer, they can do it.
But you're the one that has to approve those funds, because I can assure you that's not in our state budget.
Well,
We don't give PR money to DA's offices.
We wouldn't be funding that specific line item. We would be funding whatever she requested. Then once the money is approved, then the constitutional officer, once the constitutional officer's budget has been approved, they can make changes as they deem appropriate.
Does your Board of Commissioners have a contract with any type of media monitoring service or public relations service?
Does the Board of Commissioners?
Yes, sir.
As a board, no, sir.
Okay. Would you approve that type of funding if she had specifically requested it?
Would the board have?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak for the entire board, but knowing the board as I do, probably not. For the purpose that you've outlined, probably not.
Okay. You learned, I guess, the same way the rest of us did back in the fall, as essentially the media reported this relationship between Ms. Willis and Mr. Wade. What type of pressure was put on the Board of Commissioners, or was it anybody complained to you, or was it frustrating that you couldn't do anything about it? I'm curious what the reaction was from the board when all this scandal erupted.
Well, there's no pressure on the board per se. I mean, individual constituents, may have commented, here and there, but there's no, I didn't feel any pressure. Obviously, people would comment on what they had seen or heard or read, and I'm sure that's true for the rest of the board as well, but no pressure.
Yeah. You've kind of explained here today that the board really has no supervisory authority or control over how Ms. Willis spends the dollars that you budget for her, but the public had the presumption, until you're clarifying it here now, that the board approved this device of using an independent contractor as a special prosecutor. It helped fund this election integrity case, and a number of attorneys, both private contractors and, assistant DAs, being engaged in it, and endorsed or, didn't disapprove of the relationship between Mr. Wade and Ms. Willis. What is your reaction or response to that? Just kind of like you told us today, that's out of your control. You may not approve it, but can't stop it or prevent it.
Well, you just said a lot now, and I can't.
I'm sorry about
can't follow all of that.
All right. Okay.
So if you could repeat, I mean, the last.
Maybe I can break it down.
Yes, sir.
Do you feel like the Fulton County Board of Commissioners supported this election integrity case, or 16 cases, either by financially supporting her to pursue those cases?
Well, I don't think the board, the board had no position, or has no position on it. The district attorney, as I understand how district attorneys operate, they are free to choose the cases that they get involved in.
Okay.
And we, as a board, have no input into that.
You were never educated about that before the fact?
About
those prosecutions, election integrity cases?
I mean, was the board informed that
Yeah.
the district attorney was going to
you've made it clear she didn't specifically ask for funding for that prosecution or for the hiring of special assistant district attorneys to lead that prosecution. Did you
That's
even
correct.
know that was happening and that you were funding that even if it was in the big chunk of money?
No, we're not advised of her work program, if you will. I mean, we provide funding for her, and she sets her own work program, and I think that's probably true for, as I understand it, for all district attorneys.
Okay. There was testimony before us in previous meetings about Ms. Willis and Mr. Wade making trips to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Justice Department, and in Ms. Willis's part, I think, meeting with the Vice President of the United States. Does, I guess this may not be best for you, but I guess, Ms. Whitmore, were you aware of any expenditures for that? I mean, that was paid for with taxpayer money. Is that something that's reported, or you track that they're spending your general funds to travel and meet with the Vice President and the Justice Department?
We do record their travel expenses. I was not and have not reviewed the district attorney's office travel, the details. So I had no knowledge of what her individual, travel arrangements would have been, but their travel requests and transactions are, if they're paid for out of county resources, there is a reconciliation process that is undertaken by the traveler. If they're using the county's procurement card or travel card to pay for the travel, then there is a detailed process that they have to go through for that. But at my level, I'm not necessarily involved in looking at or reviewing any of those transactions.
Those type of travel expenses, do they require any prior approval by the county or by your office?
Our travel policy allows the elected officials to approve the travel for their staff and to approve the travel for themselves.
And you mentioned the procurement card. Is that what we call a P card?
Yes, sir. We use both a P card for non-travel related credit card purchases, and then we have a separate card that we call a T card, T for travel. So departments have both, one for basically goods and services and one that is for travel. So the county's policy is a reimbursement-based policy, so the traveler can pay for their travel expenses directly and seek reimbursement, or the county will prepay using the T card, and then the reconciliation process follows the trip.
Explain that reconciliation process. Let's say somebody uses a T card to take a trip to California or whatever. It gets charged directly to the county through that essentially credit card?
Yes, every department has a single travel card holder. And the individual traveler is required to coordinate their travel needs with the travel card holder. Travel card holder makes all of the arrangements and charges for that card, and the traveler, if they're traveling for official county business, is expected to return and supply through Concur. We use the Concur platform for our travel reconciliation process. They're expected to provide the receipts, hotel, evidence, if it was a conference, evidence that they attended the conference, and any other receipts that they may have where they are seeking reimbursement. So that is, when I refer to the reconciliation process, that is what I'm referring to from the traveler's perspective. And then each month, the travel card holder is required to pull their bank statement for the card and complete the reconciliation process for that bank statement for that period so that we can process payment to the financial institution that we use for our credit card purposes.
So is Ms. Willis the T-card holder for the district attorney's office?
I don't believe she is, no, sir.
Okay. So it would be some designated employee of the DA's office would handle that?
Yes, sir.
And at the reconciliation stage each month, they would submit the receipts from each member of that agency or department that had utilized the card?
For the charges, they would need to submit the requested documentation for the charges on the card for that statement.
Okay. Are there limits as to say, you know, will you put somebody up in a Ritz-Carlton versus a Holiday Inn? Are there caps on how much you're allowed to spend on
So our-
lodging or travel?
Our policy does outline those type of limitations, yes, sir.
And if somebody exceeds those limitations, do you simply cut the reimbursement off at whatever your cap is or your guideline calls for?
If they have requested an exception, so say they're traveling to an area and there are no hotels available, it's a conference, there are no hotels available at the host hotel and they have to move to a different location and the rates are higher, they can ask for an exception to that and seek approval for that. But otherwise, they may be charged back for those costs that are outside of the allowances allowed through the travel policy.
Does the department head have the power to override those allowances, create exceptions, as I think you said?
Exceptions are required to be approved in advance and by the county manager or his designee.
Do these rules that you've just outlined apply to the district attorney's office?
These rules apply to anyone who travels using the county's, seeking reimbursement from the county using the county's travel policy or the county's T-card.
Who is the custodian of these documents, the reconciliation process and the payments made under the various T-cards and P-cards?
The purchasing department is the administrator of the T-card and P-card program. Ultimately, the final reconciliation packages are received and retained by the finance department.
Are they under your purview?
Both of those are, yes, sir.
Okay. So you could get me that information if I properly requested it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Pitts, you are on the audit committee of the commission.
Yes, sir.
Is that by virtue of your position as the commission chairman, or is it a subset of the commission? How's that created?
Let's see. I think it's a 5-member committee, I believe, and 2 commissioners sit on that committee, and they're appointed or nominated and appointed by the board.
And currently, you are on the audit committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is Bob Ellis the other commissioner?
Yeah.
Right.
Commissioner Ellis is chair of the audit committee.
And who would the other 3 members be then, if you are the 2 commissioners?
The private citizens.
And what's the authority or the power of that audit committee? What's the role of the audit committee?
Well, we work with the county auditor, Mr. Anthony Nix, and to provide audits for various departments, areas when we see or feel that need to be looked into from an audit point of view, whether it's financial or programmatic or otherwise.
I know only what I've read in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about this, but apparently there was a recent audit report that had been requested by the audit committee.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that. What was that audit for?
I believe you're referring to the audit that was done at the request of the audit committee. We utilized an outside firm called Cherry Beckert, nationally recognized firm, to look at and review and it wasn't really an audit, it was a review of our purchasing, primarily purchasing requirements, processes within the county, and looking at all departments, but focused in on the sheriff's department and the district attorney's office in particular.
And did that Cherry Beckert, is that how you?
Beckert, yes, sir.
Did it produce a written audit report of its work?
It did.
Okay. And was that presented to the commission
Yes.
or just to your committee?
No, it was presented to the commission, and we had two representatives from the firm make a presentation to the full board a couple of meetings ago, maybe 3 meetings ago.
Did this audit reflect any irregularities or improprieties in spending by the sheriff's department?
There were, I'm going from memory, we can make the full report audit. Well, it was really a review and not an audit, but it was an audit firm, nationally recognized firm. And again, they focused on the sheriff's department and the district attorney. And there were 2 sets of recommendations, and I don't recall the specific recommendations, but with respect to the sheriff, I think they used a term of, do you remember the term? Was it high? High power. Is that it? Yeah. So the conclusion was the county sheriff's office risk level, they call it, was high, and it lists certain areas. And with respect to the district attorney, the risk level was medium.
Did it list particular areas that there was a medium risk for impropriety by the district attorney's office?
Well, I can read from the document here. The use of prosecutorial discretion as a justification comes with the risk of it being used with greater frequency, with more purchases being made over time outside of county rules and procedures.
And that expenditures that we're talking about?
Purchases.
Okay, are those purchases using a P card or a T card, or is it identified?
Probably a combination of both.
Ms. Whitmore?
Prosecutorial discretion are typically the items that the district attorney engages in directly. Expert witnesses, if there's any special evidence processing that has to take place, any visual aids maybe that need to be supplied as part of trial, any extraordinary trial expenses. Typically, the district attorney engages and secures those goods and services outside of our county procurement process, which is the reference to the prosecutorial discretion, I think is the word that they use.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Would that include travel expenses for witnesses being brought in from out of state?
Those should be following the county's travel policy. It does have a section that deals with extradition and witnesses. Again, but it applies if you're using the paying for it with county resources, seeking reimbursement, or using the county's travel card.
Would that include special prosecutors, independent contractor prosecutors?
The DA's use of prosecutorial discretion, yes.
So that's captured by this category that
Yes.
the audit report is saying
Yes, sir.
You got some moderate potential for abuse here. Did they specify any particular expenses that seem to be inappropriate in this report or this review?
Probably in the larger report, there were some instances, but I'll have to provide that to you, because that's not in this document that I'm looking at now.
Okay. Ms. Whitmore, have you provided that document? You've given me a book full of things. I don't know how much made it to it yet, but you're still in progress.
I have not. The subpoena asked for audits.
You don't consider this an audit, and this is just a review?
Yeah, it was a review, so I did not include it. But
Could you voluntarily provide me a copy of that report that you have, as well as the full report, this review?
Sue, is that sufficient? Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Noting it now.
I'm sorry, what?
I appreciate that. There were a number of references to Ms. Willis having significant expenditures for her personal security detail. Is that something that was presented to you in a budget request?
So, repeat that one, sir.
There has been testimony before the committee about the district attorney, Ms. Willis, having significant expenditures for a personal security detail that may even travel with her on these trips that she takes. Is that something that was presented to the commission as a part of a budget request, the cost of that?
I don't know whether or not, as a matter of course, the district attorney has a security detail. I don't know the answer to that.
Did Mr. Howard ever have a security detail?
I know that he had, we had some security enhancements around his home at one point because of some threats that he'd received.
Okay.
Now, with respect to District Attorney Willis, again, I don't know whether she routinely had a security detail or whether we paid for one. But in this particular instance, because of the YSL trial in particular, and
What does
the
YSL stand for?
Young Slime Life, I believe. Is that
Okay,
correct? Is that
so
right?
that's
Young Slime Life.
That's the gang-related prosecution's been going on for a year now?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Because of that trial and the election interference, it came to us in executive session that she was receiving, as were a number of us, me included,
Yeah.
particularly during the election back in 2020. I had a detail with me, but because of the YSL trial and the election interference, she was receiving threats, bodily harm, pretty serious. So a report was made to us about that in executive session, and a request came to us on her behalf to provide additional security for her. And after listening to what was going on, we, the board, listened, and then in open session decided and voted to provide additional security for her.
What's the cost been for that additional security, and is it continuing up until today?
I don't know whether it's continuing, but do you have the cost on the security?
As I recall, the full ask that was presented included relocation, as well as some hardening of her personal residence, and law enforcement support from at least 2 outside jurisdictions. I don't recall